How's it going, Algebra 2C people? This is the conclusion, actually, of 7.5 Part 2, or continuation. It's not technically new from what we did last week. It's just a little bit of a continuation. I only have two examples up here, and those are the two examples we're going to do. When they're done, they're done. And they are only a little bit different than what you attempted to do and hopefully successfully did last week. And good news, this is our last assignment. I have two examples to do, and your assignment's only got two problems on it this week, so that's pretty nice. And that's the conclusion of our class for the year under these crazy conditions. So let's get down to business. We are still solving rational equations, meaning equations with fractions. The difference that we have today is that, or this week, is that before I actually pick a common denominator with you, this denominator needs to be factored. You're supposed to look for that anyway, but last week the problems I gave you, they didn't factor, so we just got down to business. Well, this denominator factors, this one doesn't, but we have to have it factored to make our decision. So that's number one, so here we go. The factoring that I'm talking about is that this has a greatest common factor of x. So, pull the x, that leaves us with quantity x minus 4. Kind of note the x squared minus 4x. Now, I'm going to cross that off because I want to look at this version of it. This isn't like different, it's the same value, it just looks different. And now, as I look at the different pieces of this problem, there's this denominator, and this denominator. The common denominator is x times x minus 4. In other words, this is the common denominator. This x minus 4 accommodates this x minus 4. This x accommodates this x, so we get to work with that. Now remember, people, we are not changing to a common denominator. This is called the common denominator method from last week's video. We are going to multiply both entire sides by that common denominator so that the fractions will reduce, and then we can solve a regular non-fraction equation. So there's my putting the whole problem, both left side and right side, in parentheses, and we're going to multiply this x times x minus 4 to everything. Please remember that goes to the numerators only because it's technically over 1, so times 1 times 1 times 1 goes to the denominator, which means the denominator doesn't change. Starting down here, I'm going to write what this is. Now, I'm not taking anything off the problem. We just multiply it in pieces so that we can reduce. So I will call this x times x minus 4 times 16. See, all of it, all over x times x minus 4. Minus this one. So that went here. Now go into here will be x times x minus 4 times 8 all over x minus 4. Equals. Then this comes all the way over to here, which will be x times x minus 4 times 4 all over x. So I know that looks like kind of a mess. That mess is going to get cleaned up pretty quickly here. Now it's time to reduce. In the first fraction, x times x minus 4 all reduces out, leaving us only a 16. Here, x minus 4 reduces out. That's x times 8, or 8x, and that is a minus right there. And then over here, the x's only reduce out, and I need to distribute this to make it look good. That'll be 4x minus 16. That right there is not a bad equation. No x squares or anything. For me, my first order of business is going to be moving the x's to one side. And then I'll probably move up here to this workspace, which will be kind of small, but I won't need a lot of workspace once I get past that. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is add 8x to both sides. And that's out. I get 16 equals 12x minus 16. I'm going to move that up here where I can see it better. And we're going to solve that, which means we're going to add 16 to both sides. Get 32 over here. Get 12x over here. That cancels. Divide both sides by 12. That reduces out and we get x equals. Let's see if that comes out to a nice decimal for us. 30. Sorry, there we go. 32 divided by 12. It's 2 2/3. So I can either call that 2 2/3 because, you know, it says 2.6 repeating, which is 2/3. I can also call that 8/3. So whichever answer you like best. The point is this, though. You don't want to call it 2.6 repeating. You should probably, under normal circumstances, check that answer. I don't see any issues with it. Like, what I would be worried about is if one of the answers was something that would cause a 0. We talked about that last week. If something causes 0, like I think an answer like x equals 4, because 4 minus 4 would be 0. 8 divided by 0 is impossible. An answer like x equals 0 would be an issue. So we're feeling pretty good about 2 2/3 or 8/3, whichever you want. I'll leave it up to you if you guys want to check that out to make sure that that answer works out. Okay? Let's move on to the next and final example here. Very similar, but I think you need to see this a couple of times. You look at these three denominators, and this one does factor. Very similarly to the way that one did. There's a GCF of x. So I pull that x, which leaves me x minus 2. I will cross that out because this is equivalent, just different looking. Again, very similar makeup. There's x and x minus 2. This one has x. This one has x minus 2. The common denominator is x times x minus 2. Because the x is accommodated here, the x minus 2 is accommodated here, we're good. So we are going to multiply both entire sides by x times x minus 2. Start distributing there. That's x times x minus 2 times 10 all over x times x minus 2. Again, remember, that multiplies to the numerator. The denominators remain unchanged. Plus x times x minus 2 times 4 all over, sorry, that's going there, all over x. So I see x times x minus 2 times 4 all over x. And then lastly, this all the way over here is x times x minus 2 times 5 all over x minus 2. Okay, we are ready to reduce so that fractions are eliminated and I solve the equation that remains. In the first fraction, x minus 2 leaves me 10. Plus. In this group, x is, that's it. And so I have to distribute this. This is 4x minus 8. And in this group, the x minus 2's go away. That's x times 5 or 5x. Combining some like terms first. On this left-hand side, I have 4x. The 10 and minus 8 are 2, positive 2, so I'll say plus 2 equals 5x. Not that I have to, but I'm going to move that up there because that's kind of squished. We got 4x plus 2 equals 5x. We're going to get the x's on one side. This is smaller, so I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. That's out. I got a 2 there. That gives me 5x minus 4x gives me 1x. And you guys, right now, I got a concern. If I plug that 2 in right there, 2 minus 2 is 0. It's 5 divided by 0. That's undefined. By the way, if I plug that 2 into this one as well, I got the same issue. 2 squared is 4, minus 2 times 2 is 4, 4 minus 4 is 0. This isn't a solution. Which means we say no solution. Okay, so there you go. Two very similar situations in terms of how you factor to get your common denominator. Two very similar situations and how you go about solving, and the reducing is very similar. Not as nice of an answer, but a legitimate answer, and a pretty nice answer, but it's not going to work. It gives you divided by 0, which gives you undefined. Can't be having that. So that's the only change this week. In fact, some of this, once you get past this little factoring step, these two questions are easier than last week, because some of last week's stuff ended up where you had to solve a quadratic, meaning you had to factor to solve and you got two answers. And sometimes both answers worked, and sometimes one of the two answers worked and one failed. So there was more going on here. There's just one answer here. That's kind of nice. All right? That's all I got for you this week, and that's all I got for you for this year. I'll send some other closing comments in either another video or an email. All right? Take care of yourselves, guys.